Top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb. Yan yung pag-usapan natin for today's Save Up Saturday for LCF Lifestyle Talk with yours truly, your Diet Doctora, Dr. Josephine Grace Rohotan. Potassium is very, very important. Ito yung major electrolyte natin sa katawan sa ating intracellular cells. So, yung compartment natin sa katawan, two major, intracellular and extracellular, sa loob ng cell and sa labas ng cell. Sodium o yung sodium chloride na nanggaling sa asin mostly is an extracellular na electrolytes. That's why it is very important na everyday talaga meron tayong salt intake or sodium intake. Ito yung parating na deplete and kailangan i-replenish on a day-to-day basis. We tackle sodium every time we talk about potassium because they are always balanced. If you can think of it, sa loob ng isang cells, for example, kung merong nasa 100 na potassium dyan, dapat sa labas meron ding 100 na sodium. This has something to do with their electrical charges. Kasi yung electrical charges na difference, ito yung mag-lead into function or merong activity sa bawat cell. So, dapat, kung walang activity, maintained lang. And the gradient of difference, yung difference nila, ito yung nagbibigay ng different functions in our bodies. But generally, we have to have adequate amount. Dapat tama yung level of potassium and sodium natin sa ating katawan. And sodium, coming from salt, it's very, very easy to get. Yun nga lang, marami yung takot na kumain ng maraming asin. As a dictum, at least 1 teaspoon of sea salt or rock salt in a day, in addition pa sa salt na nasa pagkain na natin, those are recommended para mawala yung mga symptoms ng pagkakaroon ng panghihina, pagsakit ng ulo, and then yung mga sugar cravings, sweet cravings, usually yun ay dala lamang po ng kulang ng sodium. However, marami sa ating community members, especially those na nagsisimula pa lang, na nagkakaroon ng problems because of lowered potassium. Yung common source kung bakit merong lowered na potassium level yung mga tao, it's because hindi nila sinecure yung kanilang sodium level to begin with. Now, wala na tayong point to blame kasi nga marami na nagsimula ng hindi ganon ka-ideal way. So right now, we will tackle those na sources ng potassium na pwede nating kunin para hindi tayo magkaroon ng potassium imbalance. Of course, these are just general knowledge, but kung meron na talaga kayong signs and symptoms of hypokalemia or mababa yung potassium level, then better to consult para mabigyan kayo ng tablets or yung tawag nating therapeutic dose of potassium for correction. But we will talk about first the top 5 cheap potassium sources na pwede nating i-maximize sa low carb, especially for those na akala natin yung potassium ay nanggaling lang talaga sa saging at sa avocado. No, meron po tayong major top 5 potassium sources and low carb. And ready na ba kayo? And you will see, kung hindi kayo kumakain ng mga pagkain ito, then most likely, and especially kung hindi nyo nasa-secure yung inyong sodium level sa katawan, yung salt intake ninyo, meron na kayong cramps. So, muscle cramps is a sign of hypokalemia. Ang pagkakaroon ng panlalambot ng kamay at paa, parang walang energy kahit pa maraming kinain. So, that can still be related to lowered potassium intake. And even yung pagkakaroon sometimes ng very high uric acid. When it comes to low-carb nutrition, it could be na lowered yung potassium intake ninyo. And others would be slow bowel movement. Halos hindi na umuutot or hindi na nagpupupo kahit pa regular sana yung pagkain and enough yung pagkain. So, those can be manifestations of hypokalemia. So, if meron kayong mga ganong mga manifestations, especially at night, nagigising kayo in the middle of the night kasi nagkaroon kayo ng muscle cramps, then those might be related to potassium. So, eto na, top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb. Number one, of course, would be green leafy vegetables. So the greener it is, mas marami yung vegetables, mas marami yung potassium na laman yan. So yung mga talbos, hindi kailangan bumili ng lettuce, hindi kailangan bumili ng mamahaling mga klase ng vegetables like asparagus, like parsley, celery, even just ordinary vegetables na tumutubo lang sa inyong bakuran, those can be high in potassium. Of course, a little reminder lang para sa merong mga autoimmune diseases, merong mga thyroid problems, you might want to check first if you are sensitive sa oxalates and other FODMAPs. So, FODMAPs, yun yung mga sensitivities minsan natin sa mga green leafy vegetables. So, try to check lang if you are sensitive to those. If hindi naman, then maybe you can tolerate them. Yung isa daw sa pinakamataas is yung talbos ng beet. So, beetroot. So, para siyang singkamas, pero meron siyang makakaing talbos. Yung leaf niya ay pwede makain. So, I'm not sure if it's available in the Philippines, but what I know is available yung talbos ng kamote, talbos ng kamote, talbos ng kangkong, ng malunggay, and all of those greens, yung mga dahon na yan, mataas po yan sa potassium. At alam nyo ba, saan nga ako pumunta last time? Sa Bali, when we were in Bali, alam nyo bang kinakain nila pati yung dahon ng cassava? So, sa kanilang, they have this parang lechon na ang tawag ay babi guling. If you've been following our TikTok, na yan, I posted there something about babi guling. So babi guling is like their lechon and they serve it together with vegetables. So yung vegetable, isa sa mga vegetables nila doon ay cassava leaf. So maybe it has a special kind of processing. Hindi ko lang alam. But greens are very widely available. So kailangan i-maximize natin yan. Alugbate is one of my favorite. Basoy. So that's ground pork with alugbate. Isa yan sa mga later na na-learn ko, naging paborito kong pagkain, and thinking about it now, parang na-miss ko na. Maybe next time kapag pumunta si Maming, magpapaluto ako sa kanya ng basoy. So, that's a ground pork with any greens actually. Any meat with any green. So, I think it's Chinese derived na pagkain. So, any one of those you can enjoy with low carb. So, lahat ng yan per 1 cup of those green leafy vegetables na raw can already give you 500 to 750 milligrams of potassium in a day. So, in a day, RDA, if you base on it, 3,500 of potassium in a day kailangan natin. When it it comes to low carb nutrition, nakita natin na when we stick only to low carb, hindi naman ganon kataas yung everyday na potassium intake natin. But to replenish it, especially if you are not ensuring your salt intake and if you are physically active, then you might want to at least man lang make sure na you get some potassium every day from any of these sources. So that's our first of our top 5 na mura na potassium sources in low carb. Mura na, mataas sa potassium, but hindi mataas sa carbohydrates. So, number 2 of our top 5. So, I will lift up our picture. So, yan. So, that is, ano yan? Alam niyo ba kung ano yan? So, that is cream of tartar or chemical compound name, potassium bitartrate. So, per teaspoon of that is 495 milligram. Although ito, hindi mo basta-basta makuha sa inyong bakuran, but it can be very cheap. Nabibili yan sa any grocery store or any na mga baking store. So, hindi nyo kailangan bumili ng harina, hindi nyo kailangan kumain ng maraming tinapay just to get that potassium. You can get that potassium from pure cream of tartar. Potassium bitartrate. Just try to look lang dahil I think merong mga preparations right now that are devoid or somewhat nilolower nila yung potassium level because I don't know, baka kinokontrol lang nila for those naman. Kasi merong mga tao, especially CKD, na kinokontrol yung potassium intake because it can cause more damage. And it's not the intake of potassium or sodium na nagkakaroon ng damage sa ating kidney. It's still the sugar in inflammation. At kapag na-damage na nga yung ating kidneys, our kidneys tolerance to those supposedly essential na mga nutrients ay nagiging low na din. But generally, if you do not have any CKD, then all the more you have to make sure that you need potassium in your system. So cream of tartar, the two ways that I usually incorporate cream of tartar when I use them before is through egg. So 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar, maybe in 2 to 3 eggs, and then you beat it, batihin lang, and then it will make the egg more fluffy and at the same time a little sour. So magiging maasim siya. And if you are okay with maasim, then you can enjoy that. And still, of course, add some salt. Another would be through our electrolyte drinks. So, isa siya sa mga components ng ating electrolyte drinks. This is just a grocery find. So, kahit sa ang grocery, regardless kung anong brand, kahit ano po, it's okay lang to have cream of tartar para pang easy fix lamang. So, yan, that's just cream of tartar. You can have that in your pantry para make sure na meron tayong enough of that. So, top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb. Again, number 1 sa atin is yung green leafy vegetables dahil nandito tayo sa Pilipinas. Sobrang dami lang yan. Number 2 would be our cream of tartar. And number 3, ano yung number 3 natin? We will look it up. Can you guess kung ano yung third cheap natin na potassium source in low carb? Yan. So, yan, sardines. Per 100 grams of sardines, so nasa 5 to 6 pieces of sardines, ay meron ng 630 milligrams of potassium at murang-mura pa. I'm not sure how much right now, but I think it can just be around 50 to 75 peso per kilo kung bibili ka directly from Talipapa. So, sardines is one of the cheapest kind of fish. And kung wala man, other sources also, galunggong, and ano pa ba? Maraming ibang isda na mga maliliit and it's very high in potassium. So, you can save up a lot. Hindi nyo na kailangang bumili ng tabletas na potassium if you need potassium. Especially, sobrang dami na problema ngayon because of muscle weakness, muscle cramps, and it's just low in potassium. So, sardines is your next best thing. It's low carb. It's high in omega-3 even. Those 7 grams of fats na yan, those are high in omega-3 na kailangan ng ating katawan, especially if mahilig tayo sa baboy, mahilig tayo sa chicken, sa beef, we might want to eat balanced omega-3 to compensate with the omega-6 na nandun sa mga taba na yon. And that can be obtained from sardines. So, meron din yung ibang fishes. But sardines has one of the highest and widely available. And also, it is one of the cheapest sources of low carb. So, that's our top 3 cheap potassium sources in low carb. And we will now move on to our tingnan natin, to our top 4 cheap sources of low carb. So top 4 would be, I'm not sure if you are aware with this one, and that is, yes, eggplant. So eggplant or talong, meron siyang 229 milligrams of potassium per 100 gram. And it's also low carb. So per 100 grams of eggplant, I think nasa 3 or 5 grams of carbs lamang. So you can eat as much as kalahating kilo ng eggplant if you want in a day. And that is already gonna give you 1,000 milligrams of potassium per half kilo of eggplant if ever mauubos nyo yan. So, hindi kailangan kung anong nakikita nyo dito, ayun na lang yung kakainin nyo araw-araw. So, it's best to mix and match whatever you have in your pantry. And it's also something that can trigger your creativity on what menu to prepare for your family and for yourself for you to ensure na enough yung potassium ninyo in a day. So, that's our top 4 cheap and Ano yan? Cheap potassium sources in low carb. Now, we will now move on to our top 5. Before we move on to our top 5, tingnan natin kung sino yung mga nandito. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Liz, Selvir. Good afternoon, everybody. Buti naman at nakahabol kayo sa ating late na Save Up Saturday ngayon. Hello po. Good morning, Kathy, Dahlia, Eliseo, yung recommended about uric acid na trigger yung gout sa low carb around 1.3 years. So tingnan mo ngayon dito, Brian, baka nakulangan ka sa iyong potassium intake kasi when it comes to protein intake, there should be a balance of potassium. So try to look at your levels of potassium. And mind you, yung pagbaba ng potassium sa ating dugo ay pwedeng hindi nakikita sa laboratory. So, marami siguro sa inyo ang nakaka-experience ng palpitations, yung pabilis na tibok ng puso, muscle cramps, yun nga, slowed bowel movement, and panghihina, panglalambot ng kamay at paa. And nung nagpa-laboratory kayo, yung inyong potassium level is still normal. And that is because potassium again is an intracellular na electrolyte. So, hindi siya na measure sa loob ng cells wherein dito tayo nagkakaroon ng symptoms or ng manifestations kapag ito ay mababa na. Yung mini-measure sa laboratory is just the serum potassium. So yun yung mini-maintain ng katawan natin na normal level, sometimes even at the expense of the intracellular level. That's why when it comes to potassium management, we always go clinical. In fact, kay marami sa mga sakit when it comes to many illness na marami tayong dinadaing na sakit, may sakit ng ulo, merong masakit yung paa, masakit yung joints, meron pa nga iba parang nasisiraan ng bait. And alam nyo ba, in medicine, alam nyo ba yung unang-unang kailangan isipin muna? Rule out electrolyte imbalance first before diagnosing someone na meron na siyang psychiatric problem because electrolyte imbalance can actually do so much. It can do so many damage, especially in our mindset, in our mental health, because potassium is essential and sodium is essential sa lahat ng nangyayari sa ating katawan. So, if you have been into low carb for so long and if you still feel that you are not healing 100%, try to look at your electrolyte intake. Baka nakulangan lang kayo. Those imbalances can be corrected. And hello, NC. Good afternoon sa iyo. So that's very important. And hello also, Carolina from Taguig City. So now, okay na. Ang daldal, no? Let's go to our top 5. This is actually my favorite potassium source in low carb. If you know me, baka meron na kayong idea. And this is my favorite. And ano yan? Can you guess what that is? Hindi po buko, hindi po niyog, hindi po yung ilalagay sa mga kakanin, but it is actually the raw coconut or tuba vinegar. 1 tablespoon lang, isang kutsara lang, ay makakakuha ka na ng 192 milligrams. Parang 2 tabletas na ng potassium na supplement na binibili natin na 99 milligrams. With this one, 3 kutsara lang ay meron ka ng 600 milligrams of potassium. You can even add that to your food, to your dish. Sobrang dali lang po yan. If maasim masyado para sa inyo, you can get you can dilute it with water or isabay mo sa inyong pagluto, adobo sa puti. So sa mga mahilig sa adobo sa puti at iniinom yung sabaw ng adobo sa puti gamit ang coconut tuba vinegar, then you might see na wala kayong problema on your potassium levels. Hindi kayo nagkakaroon ng cramps, hindi kayo nagkakaroon ng panlalambot sa kamay at paa, hindi kayo nagkakaroon ng palpitations because you are ensuring your coconut tuba vinegar. Ang tuba vinegar na marami dito sa Pilipinas is even more nutritious than apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar, it's yummy, it sounds nice, and it's also very expensive, and it's not local. Support local po tayo. Raw coconut tuba vinegar, if meron kayong kapitbahay na gumagawa ng tuba vinegar, support them. As long as alam mong this was prepared the hygienic way. And it's always, and it's always clean kasi nga it's fermented. Kung meron kayo nakikitang mga parang mga little worms na dyan sa tuba vinegar, they are not worms, and they are somewhat worms, but they are not damaging to our body. Pagkapasok niya sa ating tiyan, mamamatay na yan. Those are just part of the fermentation process. Huwag kayong matakot dyan. Pinag-aralan ko lahat yan dahil tuba vinegar is my favorite. I don't drink tuba, just the vinegar. Magkaiba yung tuba sa vinegar. Yung tuba, meron pang alcohol content. Hindi pa siya fully fermented. And kapag natapos na yung kanyang fermentation process, it now becomes vinegar, just like kombucha. So kombucha is the one na hindi pa siya fully fermented. The moment that it's already fully fermented, it's already considered as a vinegar. That's why yung kombucha hack natin, if you've been part of our Life Without Rice for years, kasi I think more than 1 year na since I posted my last kombucha hack, yung ginagawa ko, kasi kombucha is not always available, and if you buy the can, it can be expensive. So, vinegar lang, 1 to 2 tablespoon of vinegar, lagyan nyo sa water, lagyan nyo ng maraming ice, you can already have like that kombucha feels. Kung nagwa-wonder kayo kung anong lasa ng kombucha, then that's it. Fully fermented kombucha. So, 1 to 2 tablespoon of vinegar, dilute in water, and lots of ice. If you feel like you're adding the sweeteners na low carb, that's in our caution list. It's up to you. But to experience that one, yun lang po, yung lasa ng kombucha. So, yun yung ating top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb. So, recap natin, green leafy vegetables, the greener it is, the more yung kanyang potassium content. Just a warning lang for those with autoimmune diseases, merong mga rheumatoid arthritis, merong mga thyroid problems, you might want to check, baka sensitive kayo. If you feel like you're having a lot of aches and pains sa inyong joints and nagkakaroon kayo ng bowel problems after you eat all of these green leafy vegetables, then it might not be for you. But if you can tolerate it, I can tolerate it maybe once or twice every 2 weeks. Yan, I can tolerate that. But if I take it every day, nagbo-bloated ako, I feel bloated whenever I eat those green leafy vegetables. So, number 2 would be cream of tartar, and that is 499 milligrams per teaspoon. Isang kutsarita yan. You can add that to your eggs or your drink or anywhere in your food. Ang potassium, since it is a mineral, parang hindi siya nade-destroy even with heat. So, pwede nyo isama sa luto. And of course, sardines, it's high in potassium. It's also high in omega-3. So, sobrang ganda. If you can make your own homemade sardines, that's even better, and you use coconut oil for that one. Number 4 would be eggplant. There are others also na mga low-carb na vegetables and fruit, but dito sa Pilipinas, and it's also very cheap, would be eggplant. So, 229 milligrams per 100 grams. And lastly, our favorite, raw coconut tuba vinegar na isang kutsara lang ay meron ng 192 milligram of potassium. I think makakaubos ako ever since I was a kid. As early as 9 years old or 10 years old siguro. Kung umiinom na ako ng kalahating cup ng suka, ng coconut vinegar sa bahay, I would ask my mom na, Ming, okay lang ba uminom ako nito? And moming also, just allow me. And sa pasanayan lang yan. Pasanayan lang yan ng sikmura. And yon, I always have that. That's why I think hindi ako nagkakaroon ng problem with potassium because I always incorporate vinegar in everything. Halos hindi ako nasasatisfy with food unless there's vinegar around. So, minsan, nagiging lang, tamad lang kumuha. But if it's there in front of me, I really like having tuba vinegar around. So, yon yung ating top 5 cheap potassium sources. And if you have budget, and if you have available ones, meron ding avocado, Brazil hazelnuts, atay, meron din pong potassium yan, and other fish like tuna, salmon, but of course, they might be a little expensive. So, it's just a trade-off. Huwag maghanap kung ano yung wala, and if you want to have that, manifest it. Believe that you can have it, and you can have it. But for now, for sure, marami lang po. At 10 pesos, kung hindi kayo magtatanim ng inyong sariling gulay, 10 pesos may makukuha na kayong isang kilong gulay, isang bundle ng gulay, and that's already enough for your potassium need in a day. Cream of tartar na available lang sa any grocery store. For your sardines, best not to take it ng canned, but make your own and bumili sa talipapa so that it will be cheaper. And eggplant also, madali lang din yan buhayin. And lastly, coconut tuba vinegar. The raw, the less processed, the better. So that's the top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb. So yun lang po yung ating episode today. Maraming salamat. I'll see you all on Tuesdays ating LCF Center for my private sessions. For those who wish to be a part of that, I think today is the last day to accept clients who will have an LCF private session. And also, as a good news, open na po yung LCF Center natin starting Tuesday then for coaching. So you can meet the coaches there. Kindly message lang yung admins natin for details. And on November 29, Boracay Meet and Greet, I will see you there. Magkita-kita tayo sa Boracay. And of course, on December 4, Christmas get-together sa mga uuwi sa Pilipinas on December. I hope you can drop by on December 4. It's gonna be an exclusive get-together para ma-prepare natin yung ating low-carb foods, yung ating mga giveaways, and yung ating short program for that time. And you can ensure that you have a slot. It's gonna be just cheap na hindi po ito mahal, okay? It's just enough to cover for the center's expenses and your food as well and the giveaways. And lastly, on December 6, 2022, 2-hour diabetes type 2 intensive course. If ever you have problems with diabetes, kung gusto nyong sumali, we have available in English and in Filipino on December 6. Just message lang po yung admins natin in the page or contact these numbers. It's +63, Philippine number po yan, or check jgrtanmd.com if ayaw nyo ng human interaction at gusto nyo mag-register ng kayo-kayo lang. Pwedeng-pwede yan. You can register via www.jgrtanmd.com. And yon, always remember to stick, of course, to the safe list, JGC Rojo food list, for more and join. Hello to LCFF community, especially to our admins who have been always very helpful, and also Life Without Rice. So yun lang guys, maraming salamat. That's our topic for today. Top 5 cheap potassium sources in low carb for our Save Up Saturday. Maraming salamat everyone. Stay low carb, stay safe. Bye. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you can see more contents in our YouTube and Facebook channels at Dr. Josephine Grace Rojo and Dr. Josephine Grace Rojo Tan, respectively. For those who wish to be guided, we have an ongoing structured learning program where we will teach you how to adapt a low-carb and fasting lifestyle for healing specific modern-day lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension, cancer, fatty liver, PCOS, GERD, and many more. You can send an email to our admins or send a DM in our inbox. I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much. Stay low-carb, stay safe. Bye!